an outing of some sort. Well, we hope that it's a very blessed day for you. Debbie, today we're going to be talking about Catholics in America, and I think a very important topic for us, especially as we look at so much of what's going on. The faith is kind of under fire, and really it's always been a bit of an uphill battle for us as Catholics in the United States. So we're going to take a look at that with a very special guest.
On this wonderful Independence Day, we're so excited. Catholics in America, that's the book that we're going to be referencing. And we have the author with us, which we're so excited. Jerry, I'm going to let you introduce him, but I'm just excited because I actually read the book and I love it. I think it is fabulous. And it really does help us get a better understanding of what Catholics have been up against, what they have conquered, if you will, in their Catholic identity. And there's a lot to talk about, and this is the perfect day to talk about it.
Indeed. And the book, by the way, by Russell Shaw is available in the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, and we will give you the phone number during the broadcast as well. It's called Catholics in America. Russell Shaw is a widely published author and journalist. He's written over 20 books, including American Church and Nothing to Hide, Secrecy, Communication, and Communion in the Catholic Church. For 18 years, Russell directed media relations for the National Conference of Catholic Bishops and the United States Catholic Conference. And from 1987 to 97, he oversaw media relations for the Knights of Columbus. And I had the pleasure of working with him when I hosted Catholic Answers Live some years ago. And Russell, it's great to have you with us today on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. How are you?
Well, I'm okay, Jerry, and it's good to be with you and Debbie, and I thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you
Very
for
good.
being on. Yes, this is.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I can't wait. Can I start? I want to just start
Yeah,
asking
please,
him a
go
bunch
ahead.
of questions. What prompted you, Russell, to write this book? It's fascinating.
Well, you know, in a sense, I've been writing this book for 40 years, Debbie. I first got interested in this whole question of the Americanization of American Catholics, and that's what the book is about. The Americanization of Catholics in the United States, and the impact that process has had on our religious identity, on our identity as Catholics. I began to see this as an issue and an increasingly important question for the vitality and the viability of the Catholic Church in this country 4 decades ago. And I started writing about it a little bit here and there, and thinking about it and reading about it, and just observing what was going on in the larger society in which we live, the secular society. And my previous book, American Church, took a kind of historical and sociological approach to the question. Now, in this new book, Catholics in America, I take a human approach by way of 15 profiles of 15 prominent Catholics who over the last 2 centuries or so have played roles, although very different roles when you read the book, but have played roles in this ongoing process and this ongoing debate about Americanization, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or a bit of both, good and bad, for our religious identity. So that's a long answer to a simple question, but it's been a long process. 40 years I've been writing this book, if you want to look at it that way.
Well, thanks for persevering, Russell. And this is, I think, such an important conversation, because sometimes it can feel like we're always on the ropes or playing from behind, if you will, as Catholics in this country, Russell. And I want you to, if you would please, flesh out what you mean by that phrase that you said, the Americanization of Catholics. Something tells me, at least when that hits my ears, I think, I don't know if that's a really good thing. And you said whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So how do you perceive that, the Americanization of Catholics?
Right. The social scientists have a more elegant, abstract name for it. They call it cultural assimilation, but no matter what you call it, we're talking about essentially the same process. And it's a process by which, over a period of time, Catholics, generation by generation, have increasingly entered into the American mainstream. That is, become integrated, wholehearted players in secular America and in the secular American culture. So that's what the process is, and that's what I mean by Americanization when I talk about it and write about it. It's cultural assimilation, the process of becoming part of the secular American mainstream, which is a process which has been going on for more than 200 years now, a bit at a time.
And Russell, for the most part, is that a good thing to assimilate or not a good thing?
It was very good at one time. You know, back in the throughout much of the 19th century, the development of Catholicism in the United States was driven by two phenomena, two big realities. One was immigration, and the other was anti-Catholicism. And believe me, those two things often were linked. Wave after wave of Catholic immigrants entered the United States. And people from Ireland, Germany,
Italy,
Poland, Eastern Europe, Italy.
That's right.
And were they welcomed here with open arms? They certainly weren't. Often the reception that the first generation of Catholic immigrants to the United States received, the reception was somewhere between cool and actively hostile. Because, you know, a lot of the old religious suspicions and hostilities and conflicts of the 17th and 18th centuries had carried over to the United States and were alive and well here in America, despite our constitutional commitment to religious freedom and religious toleration. So, you know, the Catholic immigrants often had to struggle against the effects of a really virulent hostility toward them and toward their religion. And the struggle, the name of that struggle came to be assimilation, become part of the American thing as rapidly and fully as you can, and that will be the solution to the problem. And back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, that was true. Assimilation was both a necessary and a healthy process for the newcomers to the United States and their children and their grandchildren. So generation by generation, the American Catholics did assimilate into the American mainstream, did become part of the larger secular culture. And at the time that it was going on, back then, it was good and necessary and a healthy development. But as we all know now, that American secular culture was changing and changing and changing. And the big change came, of course, during the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s and has continued ever since. It's a change which, you know, has been positive and healthy enough in some ways, but in other ways has been a change in the direction of secular hostility toward religious faith in general, and particularly, I think, toward the faith and moral beliefs of Catholics. And that's the kind of cultural reality of which American Catholics, for the last half century or more, have becoming an assimilated part through this process that I try to describe in this book and its predecessor. And that is not a positive and healthy thing for our religious identity. That undermines our identity as Catholics at the roots. And I think you see that reality becoming an increasingly threatening reality in the face and the ongoing experience of the Catholic Church in the United States today. It's mirrored in all sorts of problems that the Church has now, from the phenomenon of nominal Catholics seldom or never going to church on Sunday, to Catholics, the sympathy that so many Catholics articulate in public opinion polls for legalized abortion or same-sex marriage or whatever it might be. How does that happen? There may be a number of explanations for how it happens, but at the heart of the explanations is this phenomenon of cultural assimilation. Catholics have become part of this secularized culture, and bought into its value system, and that has not been a healthy thing for their religious identity.
Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Happy Independence Day to each and every one of you listening. We pray that it is a blessed day, and God bless America on this day and every day. Our guest is Russell Shaw, and his latest book, Catholics in America, Religious Identity and Cultural Assimilation, from John Carroll to Flannery O'Connor. We're going to talk about some of the very intriguing characters that are in the book. Archbishop John Hughes, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is in there, Father Michael McGivney, founder of the Knights of Columbus, and others. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, more with Russell Shaw here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. I like to say, and this is something maybe we can talk about as we come out of the break on the other side, but I typically prefer to call myself a Catholic American versus an American Catholic. I don't know if that's important to all of you who are listening, but at least for me, I really like to identify as a Catholic first, because of course that's what's going to endure into eternity and nothing else. So we're coming right back. Please stay with us.
I'm Raymond Arroyo with Mother Angelica, A Remarkable Life. Shortly after entering religious life here at Cleveland's St. Paul Shrine, Sister Angelica was beset by health woes. She had tonsillitis, constant colds. At one point, her knees began to swell because of all the kneeling and climbing up the 5 stories of this monastery. On at least 2 occasions, she was almost thrown out of the monastery. And then she was transferred to Canton, Ohio, her hometown. There, the swelling in her knees subsided, and she continued with religious life. Stay with EWTN as we continue to celebrate the life and legacy of Mother Mary Angelica.
When you listen to Women of Grace Live, it's not possible to come away from that hour without feeling encouraged, without feeling inspired, without feeling that you've just had the opportunity to enter into holy conversation. This holy conversation comes by way of the many callers who share with us the concerns of their heart, the issues that they're facing. I'm Janet Benkovic, inviting you to join me weekday mornings at 11 Eastern for Women of Grace on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Bishop Paul Bradley of the Diocese of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Hi, this is Tim Staples from Catholic Answers Live.
This is Father John Ricardo. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Thanks for being with us on Take Two with this special broadcast on Independence Day. Happy Independence Day. We have Russell Shaw with us, the author of Catholics in America, and we've been chatting with him about the idea behind the book and what it means for all of us and what we can learn from the book. And I want to jump right in because Jerry, before the break, Russell was sharing about some of the figures that you profiled in the book, and he mentioned my favorite chapter, which was on St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. Well done, I must say. I have to say, I read it actually twice, that chapter. I absolutely loved it, and I think you did just an amazing job. But you learned so much from each chapter. I mean, each chapter is almost like a little mini book.
Yes, I guess that's true, isn't it? Well, these were fascinating people to write about. I mean, these are not ordinary people in many senses. These people who had led interesting, unusual, and even adventurous lives in their own ways. And Elizabeth Seton was one of those. Her story is a story of great courage. I would say a woman who faced enormous hardships which only grew worse and more painful after she converted to Catholicism. Her late husband's family at that point pretty much rejected her and her children. Imagine that. She becomes a Catholic convert and a widow and with several children, and she's pretty much rejected by her late husband's family because she'd become a Roman Catholic. It tells you something about the way Catholics were regarded in early 19th century America, at least in some sectors of the society. Anyway, having become a Catholic and soldiering on, if you will, to raise her children and lead a good religious life, she became an educator. She became a religious founder, and she's now regarded as one of the founders of the Catholic school system in the United States. But there's another reason, as a matter of fact, not quite such a positive reason, why it's worth thinking back to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and that is that that Catholic school system, which she founded or co-founded, is now greatly reduced in size, and I would say, realistically speaking, probably threatened with in its continued existence, largely because of rising costs and the ongoing secular intention of, I believe, squeezing those schools out of existence through the pocketbook, just making it impossible for people to continue to patronize the schools in large numbers because they become too expensive. So it's the story of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and the story of the school system she founded. That's definitely part of the ongoing drama of American Catholic experience in the United States, and it's part of the story whose outcome is not yet settled by any means.
Our guest today on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie Russell Shaw, author of a number of books. His latest, Catholics in America. We are talking about some of the figures that he profiles in the book, which again is available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. That website, very easy, EWTNRC for Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, or you could order by phone at 1-800-584-6316. And Russell, one of the characters I've been fascinated with for a long time, and you actually start the book with Archbishop John Carroll, who was Archbishop of Baltimore and Maryland. And we've talked about how Catholics have had to kind of plow some tough ground from the earliest days of the United States, and he really, you could say, got out the plow and did a lot of that foundational work, didn't he?
He did indeed. But he did it from in a sense, a privileged position. Unlike many, I would say most Catholics in the country at that time, John Carroll came from a very prominent and very well-off family, a thoroughly Catholic family, and that was a rarity too. But the Carrolls of Maryland were part of the establishment of those colonial and revolutionary America days, and John Carroll certainly benefited from that head start over so many people. He became a priest. He rose to the top of the clerical structure in the United States, and when it came time for Rome to choose the first bishop in the United States, John Carroll was the obvious choice. As far as this question of assimilation is concerned, he saw it as an absolute necessity that the American Catholics should become an accepted part of American society. You know, after the Revolutionary War, there aren't any very firm and solid figures, but it's generally estimated that there were only about 25,000 Catholics in the whole country, the whole 13 colonies which had become the United States of America. Only 25,000, and they were, largely on the margins of society. They were poor people, not well regarded, subject to active persecution in some places. And it was Carroll's mission, a mission he carried out with great success, great intelligence, sensitivity, and diplomacy. It was his mission to win acceptance for that tiny community, religious community, American Catholicism as it was then. And he succeeded. He succeeded to a great extent. He himself was, as I say, a well-regarded and rather prominent member of a well-regarded and prominent family. And starting from that position of strength, he brought many of his co-religionists, the poor and excluded American Catholics of those days into the promised land, if you will, of acceptance in the larger American society.
Russell, let me ask you this question. In your book, which character, which chapter that you highlighted, would you say that that person or group of people that they were associated with, who had the best kind of, like, they pioneered, if you will, see, perfect word, pioneered the ecumenical kind of dialogue to try and bridge those gaps? Like you said, like the Catholics were on the margins, and they were persecuted somewhat, or whatever, pushed away from society. Who kind of was the leader in trying to bring about that ecumenical, conversations?
Well, I would personally say, although in the historical period that I'm writing about here, ecumenism was still in its infancy, so there wasn't some kind of strong Catholic ecumenical movement, or a very strong ecumenical movement generally. But to the extent there was an interest on the subject, I would single out for mention Father Isaac Hecker. Maybe not a well-known name today, but in his time a very well-known, very prominent Catholic. Isaac Hecker was the founder of the Paulist Fathers. Hecker lived from, he was born in 1819 and he died in 1888. Hecker had a vision. He was a visionary man, if you will. He was convinced that the evangelization of American Protestant culture was a realistic possibility for the Catholic Church. He was a convert himself, by the way. He'd been born a Protestant, but with a very strong interest in religion generally. And as a young man, he converted to Roman Catholicism, which was unusual enough in itself. In a few years, he founded the Paulist Fathers, and the objective of that new religious entity, as Father Hecker saw it from the start, was the evangelization of Protestant America, which Father Hecker regarded as a strongly realistic possibility in the middle years of the 19th century. For Hecker, evangelization didn't mean some kind of triumphalistic exercise in fighting a hostile or religious entity. Rather, Hecker, a former Protestant himself, was very sympathetic to Protestants, and he felt that dialogue with the Protestant community was a real possibility, and that friendly and intelligent dialogue would, in fact, lead to Protestant conversions, large numbers of Protestants. So, in his own way, Isaac Hecker was a forerunner of ecumenism in the United States, I think, and his vision was a very important reality in helping to shape the attitudes and the processes of the American Catholic Church in the latter years of the 19th century.
That's a great chapter, I just have to say. Can I say real quickly, you have a quote here. It says, "God's providence was preparing me for a great work." Is that Father Hecker's?
That's Father Hecker. He was writing
okay.
to a priest who'd written him to express admiration for what he was doing, and he explained how he came to found the religious order that he founded, the Paulists. He had a strong sense that this wasn't an accident, and that it wasn't in the final analysis his work, that he'd been led to do it by God.
Well, we'll have more with Russell Shaw, special Independence Day broadcast of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, looking at Catholics in America, Catholicism in the United States. And we are glad that you are with us. So we are going to be coming right back. We'll tell you again how you can get Russell Shaw's latest book, Catholics in America, and more. So please stay with us.
Something amazing is happening on EWTN. One wildly dynamic speaker and a team of young missionaries are on a cross-country road trip, spreading their message of hope in Christ. Their passion is awakening youth to the power of God's love. It's energetic, honest, affirming, like nothing you've seen on TV before. You're Amazing with Justin Fatica. Thursdays at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Global Catholic Network, EWTN.
On Easter Sunday, Mother Mary Angelica returned to the arms of the Lord she spent her life serving. Now, the religious orders and the Catholic media network she founded celebrate her life the way she lived hers, through prayer and service. EWTN Home Video invites you to join the Franciscan Friars of the Eternal Word and the Poor Clares of Perpetual Adoration for Mother Mary Angelica's Rite of Reception and Divine Mercy Chaplet, Solemn Vespers in Memoriam, Vigil and Rosary for the deceased, Rosary in Memoriam, and of course the Mass of Christian Burial with Archbishop Chaput. To get your copy of In Memoriam, Mother Mary Angelica, PCPA, log on to our web store, EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and type in item number HDIMMA or call 1-800-854-6316. The EWTN Book of the Month for July is Mother Angelica's Answers, Not Promises. Mother's straightforward solutions to life's puzzling problems are written in this practical, humorous, and common-sense collection that will help you with your struggles and draw you closer to God. It's available through the EWTN Religious Catalog web store, EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
So glad that you're with us, and that Russell Shaw is with me and Debbie on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on Independence Day. Again, Russell Shaw's latest book is called Catholics in America. Fascinating profiles of 15 very influential Catholics early in the history of the United States. You just heard some spots there mention EWTNRC.com. That's the website where you can find this book, or 1-800-584-6316. Again, 800-584-6316, or EWTNRC.com. And Russell, we're going to look at some more of the individuals that you profile in the book, but I want to get back for just a minute to a discussion about Catholicism in the United States. Obviously, Catholics and Catholicism have come a long way, but it just seems like it's swimming upstream all the time. And I don't know if it's just my perception, but so many things that transpire in our culture and our government and so forth, academia, sometimes just have Catholicism in the crosshairs. Am I imagining that, or does it seem like there's just always kind of this anti-Catholic sentiment that reigns in this country?
Well, I wish you were imagining it, Jerry, but I don't think you are. I think you're putting your finger on a very painful reality of American life. But I need to make a distinction, okay? It's not, what shall I say? It's not all Catholics who are targets of the hostility of the secularists in American life today. It's Catholics who are, if I may put it this way, faithful to the values and the teaching of the Catholic Church. The thoroughly assimilated Catholics, the Catholics who joined ranks, if you will, with the secularists and support so many of the social goals and objectives of secularism in the United States, they're okay. They're not anybody's targets. It's the faithful Catholics who've become the targets, and that's not an exercise in paranoia. That's just a statement of painful fact. If you're faithful to traditional religious values, you're going to come under criticism, pressure, and a form of subtle persecution in some circumstances at the hands of the secularists who control so many of the levers of power in our society today. And this is true not only of Catholics and the Catholic Church, it's true of religious groups generally. If you're part of an organized, ongoing commitment to the religious tradition, you're in for some trouble at the hands of the secularist society.
Russell, I have to ask you this question because this has always been, and now I get to ask you where thousands and thousands can hear us, which is exciting. I consider myself an Orthodox Catholic. It always just baffled me to no end of why it is that we can't somehow raise awareness to our fellow Catholics that by them saying that they are Catholic in name only, but not really living out their Catholicism in a full way, it's doing great damage. And I don't. How do you get that to our fellow Catholics? Because you don't want to sound judgmental. You don't want to come across, and it's so frustrating. I have to tell you, in all the years I've been in religious education, I used to have people come up to me all the time, and they would say, and this is no joke, Russell, they would say to me, "So you're an Orthodox Catholic? You don't seem like you are. You're kind of cool." And I'm like, I know I'm cool, and I'm Orthodox Catholic.
She's
it's
very
like,
cool, Russell.
Thank you. But and I know you're chuckling, Russell, but seriously, how do we communicate this to our fellow Catholic brothers and sisters and say, guys, wake up?
Well, Debbie, you're asking a very, very relevant and a very difficult question. Let me take a crack at answering it as best I can, however. I must begin by saying it isn't easy. Today, particularly for reasons I'll try to explain, it is not easy to reach the folks you're speaking of. I think the only realistic answer is it's got to be done pretty much on a one-by-one, face-to-face, person-to-person basis. It's got to be done by individual committed Catholics living out their Catholicism in their families, in their neighborhoods, in their workplaces, and not afraid to stick up for the Church and not unable to offer rational explanations for what the Church believes and practices to their fellow Catholics in these everyday settings in which they find themselves, classrooms, offices, neighborhoods. That's where it's going to be done. And the reason it's got to be done on that one-to-one, one-on-one, everyday neighborhood basis is because, to such a great extent, the traditional religion no longer has access to the mass media. I mean, the folks who listen to EWTN, the folks who read books like mine, they're great folks, and thank God they're out there. But they represent we can reach them, but they're a minority, I'm afraid, of the American Catholic community as a whole. Most of the larger community of American Catholics don't listen to EWTN, and they don't read books like mine, and they don't read good, solid Catholic periodicals. They're into the secular media, and that's their source of ideas and values when it comes to the issues that the Catholic Church so often finds itself embroiled in controversies over. I mean, issues like abortion and same-sex marriage and all those things which comprise what is usually called the culture war today. So our fellow Catholics out there over and over and over again are not getting their take on religious values and religion generally. They're not getting their take from truly Catholic sources. They're coming from the secular sources who, in fact, are profoundly hostile toward the Church and its values and its beliefs. And that's part of the intensely difficult problem that we would like to turn it around, that we have to face realistically and deal with as best we can.
Well, and we could spend hours and hours, Russell. We're all involved in the media. You've got an extensive media background, and you probably had no small amount of difficulty getting cooperation from secular media when you worked for the Bishops' Conference and the Knights of Columbus and so forth, but that would be a topic for another time. Russell Shaw is our guest here. Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Happy Independence Day. I want to get to one of the figures in your book, Russell, because it is, of course, as everybody knows, we're in the 3-year election cycle that seemingly never ends. It's like after a presidential election, we're gifted with about 6 to 12 months of time off from all of it, and then it just seems like we're back to it. But yeah. Al Smith, a four-term Democratic governor in New York, ran for president in 1928, and talk about this because he was a lot of Protestants were suspicious of him, thought he was a pawn of the Pope, and how is he important, especially given the milieu in which we find ourselves right now, rolling headlong toward a presidential election?
Well, Al Smith was was an unapologetic Catholic politician. He was a very successful politician, too. Yeah, 4 terms as governor of New York, presidential candidate of the Democratic Party in 1928. And he rose very, very far and came very, very close to the big prize in American politics, namely the election as president. Smith was a great man. I think he's not. People don't pay a lot of attention to Al Smith today, but everything I've read about him suggests that he was a man of character and a self-educated man of great natural intelligence and shrewdness, and a great student of human nature. In 1924, at the Democratic Convention in 1924, Franklin Roosevelt nominated Al Smith as the party's presidential candidate. And in nominating Smith, Roosevelt in 24 called him the happy warrior of the political battlefield. And that was a tag which stuck with Al Smith for the rest of his life, the happy warrior. And he was a happy warrior. He was an essentially optimistic and positive man with a great political record, I must say, absolutely clean as a hound's tooth, no hint of scandal anywhere in his career, and a man who accomplished significant positive things during his terms as governor. There's a contrast, I think, there just in that word happy, by the way. If you look at our present potential presidential contenders, you might use various words to describe them, but I don't think anybody would use the word happy first and foremost.
Or squeaky clean.
or either. They're a different breed of cat. Smith wasn't like that. He loved politics, he loved people, he loved what he was doing, and it came through. When Smith finally got the Democratic nomination in 1928, he became the target of a really vicious outburst of anti-Catholicism. And he had to defend himself, and he did defend himself, and he defended the church nobly and courageously throughout the 1928 campaign. And he lost. He lost badly, and quite possible that any Democrat would have lost in 1928, but a lot of the reason for Al Smith's wipeout in 28 was the fact that he was a Catholic. But he never apologized for being a Catholic, and he never apologized for his church. He defended his Catholicism and his church, as I say, courageously and nobly in the face of a very vicious attack. I hate to make painful comparisons, but when John Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he similarly came under fire from the anti-Catholic bigots of that day. And in a notable speech in Houston, Texas, in September of 1960, Kennedy dealt with the anti-Catholicism then facing him by promising an audience of Protestant ministers that if elected president, he certainly would not be influenced by his religious faith. And if you don't think that was a turning point in the development of the Catholic politicians' approach to politics in the United States, look again, because that was a big turning point. And a lot of our Catholic politicians, ever since 1960, have taken a leaf out of John Kennedy's page and played their Catholicism exactly the same way, something which never would have occurred to Al Smith a few decades before 1960.
Well, you're actually referencing the chapter, and I actually was, I opened up to it as you were speaking about Al Smith, and it's the Rome Meets Camelot, and you did, again, a fabulous job. Well, you did a fabulous job on all of them, all the figures, but John F. Kennedy, you did just a great job at really having a lens of how people saw JFK one of two ways, you know what I mean? And so it was very interesting how you described it in that chapter, and I thought you really did a great job educating all of us and really kind of giving us the idea behind how his presidency made Catholicism, you know, it gave it really it kind of gave it a little different name, if you will. Am I saying that the right way?
Yes, and I appreciate what you're saying. I hope I was fair to John Kennedy. I wanted to be fair to John Kennedy, and this is not a personal attack on John Kennedy, but as you correctly see from what I wrote, I am not an admirer of John Kennedy, and I think I explain why pretty clearly, and I hope adequately and fairly, in what I write about him in this particular book.
Yes, you definitely did. It was beautiful. But go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to mention again, Russell Shaw is with us here. Winding down, we're in the home stretch of this Independence Day airing of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. I'm Jerry Usher, along with Debbie Georgianni. Russell Shaw's latest book, he's the author of over 20 books. Latest is called Catholics in America. If you want to get a real, I think, thorough snapshot of some of the figures who helped to shape the faith that we enjoy as Catholic Christians in this country right now, in the early years and the first couple of centuries of the United States, order this book through EWTNRC.com or 1-800-584-6316. And I've got a follow-up question, Russell, and I'm almost certain, guaranteed, I know what your answer is going to be, but we see people of faith, when they run for president now in the United States, it becomes such an issue, and the dancing and the shifting and the back and forth and the high wire act that they are forced to perform, if you will, to try and appease the secularists while still interjecting or introducing some thread of their faith into their campaign. It makes me wonder, could a faithful Catholic have any shot at becoming president of the United States, or even nominated, given the cultural situation we have right now?
It would be an uphill battle. I sometimes ask myself the same question. I think there's a possibility. I'm not nominating anybody at the moment, but I think remains a possibility that a Catholic could win the nomination and be elected, and that he or she could do so without compromising his or her faith. But it would be a long, hard slog, and the religious issue would certainly come to the fore during the campaign. So I like to think it's still possible. I like to think the Constitution's prohibition of religious tests for public office would apply in those circumstances too. But I recognize the enormous difficulty of pulling it off in this day and age, given the change in our culture and the change in the way that so many Catholic politicians have chosen to handle the question.
You know, it's really interesting, Russell, what Jerry was asking you about that, and used the word, Jerry, I believe you used the word, he has to dance on that high wire and, perform for all of us. It's so true. When candidates first come out in public and announce their candidacy, they have all these bullets, if you've ever seen it, these bullets of, I'm pro-life, and I'm this, and I'm that, and I'm Catholic, and whatever. And it sounds so great when they first announce their candidacy. And then they take the podium and they give a speech, and you can see them hear them start shifting to try and, like Jerry was, just dance around, and it's unbelievable. Sometimes when I'm watching it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is this the same person that had their first campaign sign that had all these nice bullets that said they were pro-life, this, that? They're definitely not that. It's interesting how do they just succumb to even peer pressure just to have all these eyes on them, that they're thinking, Catholics must be some kind of aliens that say stuff, so they've got to make sure they fit in? Or what is it? Is it a subconscious thing? I don't get it.
Oh, it's a combination of things, I think, Debbie. It's pressure, certainly peer pressure from the media, and there's very real pressure from the media to fall in line with the conventional wisdom of the secular world. And there's also the pressure exerted on them by the desire to move up in politics. If you're a member of Congress representing a heavily Catholic and conservative district out there someplace or other, you can remain a pretty traditional conservative Catholic too, because you're reflecting the values and the beliefs of a solid majority of your constituents. But if you want to contest for a higher office, out not just your little piece of America with a large conservative Catholic population, but a much bigger chunk of contemporary America with a pluralistic population made up of people of all shades of belief and disbelief, why then your commitment to conservative or traditional Catholic values is likely to get thinned out a good deal in the quest for winning a majority of the next election. So I think you've got a complex process in which all of these pressures, including very much the pressure for ambition, the desire for upward political mobility, these things come into play in the lives of politicians, as they would, I suppose, in the lives of any human beings facing similar situations. To move up, you've got to go along with the contemporary value system of the majority of the people in control, anyway, of the situation in which you hope to move up. So that's the way it is for Catholic politicians today. Conform if you want to get ahead.
Well, I may be jaded, but if I watched even 5 minutes of all of the debates combined, it was by accident. But that's, again, a conversation perhaps for another time. Russell, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes. I wanted to ask about one of the key Catholic figures in your book, Archbishop Fulton Sheen. We're all media people here on this program today. We can't let the hour end without a mention of the great contribution that he made and was just so wildly popular among people of all persuasions, really.
Yes, it was. It was part of the American religious boom of the 1950s. Archbishop Sheen did not stand alone. He was part of a remarkable development in American life generally, but he was head and shoulders above so many. He was a great evangelizer, and as we now more and more are coming to realize, a very holy man, a man who recognized his own flaws and faults. He was a bit of a showboat, and he knew he was a bit of a showboat, but he was a holy showboat, if you will, and very good at it. And as I say, a great evangelizer. Whether anybody could reproduce what Fulton Sheen did in the 1950s, whether anybody could reproduce it here and now in changed social and cultural circumstances and change very different media circumstances, I'm not sure. It would be much harder now in some ways than it was back then. But he came along at providentially the right time to show you how you did it in the new medium of television, and I think he provided us with a lasting, permanent model of that to aspire to, a model telling us that some way or other you really can do it via the media. So don't hang back, go into the media and make use of this powerful or potentially powerful tool of evangelization.
Right. He was so strong, and his words still resonate with all of us today. You hear him mentioned so many times of the things that he taught when he was alive, and it comes out you can hear it in Catholic radio all the time. They're constantly referencing Fulton Sheen, which is very interesting. It's funny how things come back, and you go back to the basics, and he taught it so well and with such strength. And I think that was it really hit people really hard.
That's you said something important there. The strength with which he taught the faith. He was a man of deep faith, and that more than anything else, I think, accounts for the power of his message. He believed in it intensely. This was essential to his own spiritual life, and he wanted to share it with the rest of us, and he did, with genius.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Russell, we have pretty much come to the end of the hour. We got about 30 seconds left. If you've got any other projects in the pipeline, maybe they're top secret and you can't mention them, but anything that you're working on, you're always a busy guy.
Well, in a short time, I think the Catholic periodical I write for, Our Sunday Visitor, will have published Maybe by this time they'll have it in print now. An open letter to the Republican and Democratic conventions. So that was a little project of mine quite recently, to address a few words to the good folks out there in Cleveland and Philadelphia up there. Tell them maybe a thing or two that's on my mind as a concerned American, and that I hope they attend to as they go about their jobs as participants in the two-party conventions.
We should take up a collection, make sure they each get a copy.
Okay, that's hilarious. Russell, I always like to put our guests on the spot, especially our really amazing guests like you. Will you be with us again? Will you come on the show again?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Me. Anytime.
Thank you so very much. Happy Independence Day to you.
Happy Independence Day.
Thank you, Russell. Appreciate your time.
Well, dear listeners, don't forget to go to take2show.com. Take2show.com. There's a link there. You can also find us at jerryanddebbie.com, and make sure you leave your prayer intentions and prayer requests on the prayer wall. It's very active, and we're praying round the clock just for you. So don't forget that. Jerry?
Well, I want to mention tomorrow on the show, speaking of prayers, who are you fighting for? And when we say fighting, maybe there's somebody that you know who is away from God or going through a horrific time, illness, injury, trying to find work, and maybe you're doing battle in prayer for that person. It's during those times that prayer seems impossible for those who are going through tough situations. So maybe you are on the front lines doing battle in prayer for somebody. So be thinking about that, because that is our topic tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
And we hope you're celebrating today on Independence Day. Have a beautiful day with family and friends. And until we meet again, just remember, set your dial to EWTN Radio. Don't forget. We'll see you soon. God bless you.
Nicely done, everyone. We're clear.
Yeah, good show. Thank you, Russell.
Russell,
you are pleasure. I enjoyed
you're
it.
amazing.
It went fast. I'm grateful it went fast.
Yeah.
Oh, good. And we didn't even have any calls. That was just us conversing. But I have to tell you, you are so great. I would just love to talk to you. You're just amazing. I love the way you explain things. It makes complete sense. Yeah, you're wonderful. Thank you so much.